Well, this has turned out to be a mother lode of information. This is the Harvard Magazine, September-October 2012 issue. And that's a 1959 Ford. Never owned one. I had a 61. Well, this issue here is Can America Compete? Strategies for Economic Revival. It's an article. It's the best at the Harvard Business School. Now, this is Harvard University's own publication, and they have a great article here. There's three special people here. Michael Porter, he's a Lawrence University professor. Now, when you have a name before the university, you know he's pretty high up. And the reason for that is they name chairs, they have people sponsor certain interests they have, and so when you see a name before university, they are special in the upper echelon. He's a leading scholar of competitive strategy. In his Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness, I quote, "For the past 2 years, Michael Porter's work has towered over the field of competitive strategy." Obviously, the top probably in the area. He has also another gentleman by the name of Jan Rivkin, Rauner, professor, again, a chair for him too, of Business Administration, chair of the strategy unit. Then lastly, we have Willie Shih, S-H-I-H, who is a professor of management practice, having joined the Technology and Operations Management in January 2007, and he teaches Technology and Operations Management. He's also former Eastman Kodak Executive Vice President and Senior Vice President for 9 years, and all three of these gentlemen collaborated together to talk about these two issues, strategic, context, and manufacturing. These are two of the 6 major sections in this 17-page article. Hi, I'm Straight Talk. We're broadcasting live from the studios of RCTV. Welcome again tonight. And tonight is not the typical Wednesday night. I've had to change schedules. So from now until the election, I have a number of different programs, and I'll be skipping around depending on how fast I can get the programs through. As usual, we have left, we have Democrats, liberals, and progressives. I'm waiting for one. It's been now over 3 years without any one of these gentlemen talking, to have a discussion about issues of why they believe what this is and why I am a conservative third party, Constitution Party member. Well, let me give you the premise for this evening's program. Obama mostly has not been doing what these experts are recommending in the 4 key areas: business outsourcing, government regulations, government policy, and government tax policy. So these 3 gentlemen collaborated to discuss these things. The key problem is that we have a president who has not had the business experience to evaluate the multiple proposals his experts are presenting to him. According to the definition of a recession, which we're in, we've been out of the recession since 2009. And President Obama started in 2009, January 1st. We have the worst job recovery, 8% plus unemployment for 4 years since the Great Depression and even before, if not ever. He has spent about $800 billion on his first stimulus, and his other stimuluses is that he's accumulated 4 years of $1.3 trillion and more deficits every year of his administration. So this adds on to what he's already given for $800 billion. You can't call it any other words. The total deficit that he's accumulated in 4 years, that is debt, D-E-B-T, since we're talking about the total deficit of all these years, is $16 trillion. We can't pay our creditors unless we ourselves cause serious inflation that will be coming and hurt everybody. And we've had that happen before. This is the reason he hasn't passed a budget in 4 years, because he wants to continue to spend. Passing a budget would restrict his spending. Romney has that ability because he thinks, like these 3 experts, and has had the experience to evaluate complex proposals. Case in point, Solyndra. You remember Solyndra went bankrupt within several months of getting maybe $500 million, and that's approximately the loss that they sustained. It was a result of gross negligence and malfeasance, which would not happen under Romney's watch. So let's elaborate a little bit on these premises. Wikipedia was a source for the background and experience of both Romney and also President Obama. I use Wikipedia because it is left of the center, and they say so in their own information that they use. Let's talk about them. Both Romney and Obama graduated from Harvard University. Romney attained a joint law degree, third in his class, and an MBA, and he was called an MBA. He had an MBA, but it's a Baker Scholar, so obviously another special award. He was in the top 5% of his class. Obama has a law degree and no record on his grades. As usual, you remember that they were forced, the Senator, Mr. Reid, said, why doesn't Romney show his tax returns beyond what's required by law? He said that over and over again. So now he showed his tax returns, but Obama hasn't showed any of his records, and he's not inclined to. His records are sealed. Yet Kerry, Gore, Bush, all of those guys and previous presidents have done so. Obama's work experience, and this I took exactly out of the Wikipedia with no adjustment whatsoever. And this is the listing. Community organizer, lawyer, constitutional law professor, and author. Romney. He became a member of the 1976 Boston Consulting Group. It's a management consulting group. In 1977, he co-founded a company called Bain & Company. And the co-founder, Mr. Bain, said, of the 30 years old Mr. Romney, he had, I quote Bill Bain, he had the appearance of a confidence of a guy who was maybe 10 years older, and this is at his age in his 20s. Unlike other consulting firms, this is Bain, which issued recommendations and then took off, Bain & Company actually immersed itself in the client's business and worked with the clients such as Monsanto, Burlington Industries, and Corning. It's very important. Consultants can give you recommendations and then just walk away and they get their fee. In this case here, they were sincerely looking to try to help these companies. He started, I guess he co-founded in 1984 a company called Bain Capital, which was a private equity investment firm. This kind of a firm invests in companies that cannot obtain financing or an angel. An angel is someone who has a lot of money and he's willing to finance certain businesses. So private equity does fit in the business world for companies. They can't get to the bank, can't get an angel, and they have to resort to another type of firm. And this isn't the only firm. There are many firms who do a lot of this private equity. The overall success rate of Bain Capital was 50%. Now that's extraordinary. It's a very high rate to have 50% succeed, knowing that most of these companies would actually go out of business. If they didn't find a private equity company, there's no place else they would go to. Anyway, he left Bain Capital in 1990 and then was asked to return to save the same corporation that he had co-founded. And then eventually in 1992, he left Bain Capital and he ran for governor of Massachusetts. So let's hear what these three Harvard University best professors in the management school of Harvard University. Slide one, please. Slide one, please. Okay. Can America compete? It was that Harvard magazine. Okay, we're talking about business outsourcing. I quote, American businesses, right from this magazine, which I will put up here so you all can see it. And if you can show that, Mr. Porter is here, senior gentleman, and Mr. Rifkin is over there. Mr. Shi, maybe it's Shia, I don't know. Maybe I'm mistaken. He's an Asian, and there's Mr. Shi, maybe Shai. Well, should have checked with a Japanese person or Chinese person. Anyway, back to the slide, please. I quote from this journal, American businesses should be locating certain activities abroad because that makes them more competitive by enabling them to better penetrate international markets. In some cases, producing offshore also saves unnecessary costs of shipping goods to distant markets or allows better adaptation of products to local circumstances. And that was Michael Porter. Now, we've heard ad after ad talking about how Mr. Romney has outsourced all these jobs. Now, one limitation, a qualification of that statement by Mr. Obama. Mr. Obama, rather President Obama, knows that this resonates with the worker, the blue-collar worker. Unfortunately, he's not telling the whole truth. Most of the companies outsource. In fact, another gentleman will be talking about, Mr. Immelt, Jeffrey Immelt, who was one of the people selected for the Council of Jobs and Competitiveness in the United States, actually left his position here. He was also, that is part of the council responsibility, in 2011. He left, and as president of GE, we found out later that he was outsourcing some of the latest technology, imaging technology to China. So obviously, they didn't do a very good check on his background to find out what he was doing. Obviously, it was an embarrassment for the Obama administration. So he's telling, President Obama is telling people what they want to hear to get elected, obviously. Next slide, please. Government regulations. Ironically, we've lost some of the things that seem more basic. For instance, do we have a regulatory environment that makes it easy to conduct business? The World Bank Doing Business report ranks every country on the ease of doing business. 20 years ago, the U.S. would have been by far the easiest place. Now we're well down the list, not in the top 10. I participated in some government established working groups dedicated to improving their rankings. Lately, the U.S. just hasn't been improving their rankings. And again, this is a comment by Michael Porter. Next slide, please. I quote, I worry about biotech manufacturing medical devices, where we have a lot of regulatory issues. Europe is an easier place, a lot easier for medical devices, so we're chasing a lot of companies that make them offshore. Willie Shy. He's commenting, and this is a big problem for Massachusetts. We have taxation on these companies, and this is going to increase the problem that we won't attract those kinds of people. Next slide, please. I quote, and this is on government policy. One of the myths, and this again, Michael Porter, the lead expert, one of the myths about competitiveness is that it is driven mostly by government policy and that the solution to competitive problems is not government action. And, you know, President Obama talks about you didn't build it, and in a way he's denigrating. Somebody else did it for you. And so what's the point of doing that? All companies start off as small businesses. There was no point making that statement. We know everyone built it, but it's our taxpayer dollars, not the government. The government is an entity, but it's only because we're there. So it's unfortunate that that's what he's looking for. Welfare socialist state is his angle. He wants to diminish business. Fortunately, the big business are the ones he should be going after. Next slide, please. Okay, again, another quote by Michael Porter. This is government tax policy number one. Almost everyone agrees we got to simplify the corporate tax code. Statutory rates are too high. The code is riddled with loopholes. Deductions need to be reduced. The right policy is to lower the rate substantially and to end most deductions. That's a policy that economic theory supports, and almost everybody in the private sector agrees with, though some will lose cherished deductions. Well, in the case here, we have the government starting a business called Solyndra. they had all kinds of money spent, I don't know, 10, 20 billion dollars to spend on startup companies to get into this clean energy issue. And we've noticed the incompetence that we're talking about here. In addition to that, they never really understood business because who came on the scene was China. They underpriced everybody. Companies in the United States, also in China, in Europe, were going out of business. Never thought of that because obviously the government just likes to spend the money, take it out of our pockets, spend the money, and claim they're doing something. Is again, the corporations are certainly far better than the governments. Slide number 5, please. I quote, almost, apologize. One other thing I meant to state the last time was the idea. That's okay. All right. Let's continue on, please. I think there's another slide before that, but we'll go along with this right now. Government tax policy number 2. I quote, the U.S. has an unusual system of taxing our companies on foreign income, which has led dozens of companies moving their corporate headquarters offshore and American companies holding more than $1 trillion of cash abroad then repatriate it. That is, in other words, instead of spending it here in the United States, they're going offshore. Almost all agree that a better system would harmonize U.S. practices with those of other leading countries. Again, Michael Porter on this issue here. There was another slide here, number 5. I don't see that. It was supposed to be almost everyone agrees. You have that, Mike? Okay, that's the one I was looking for as the first one. Almost everyone agrees. I quote, we've got to simplify the corporate tax code. Statutory rates. I apologize. I guess we just did that one. Sorry. Go ahead, next. All right. Great. Okay, moving places offshore. I quote, the government has to correct some of the policy deficits that cause the U.S. to be a less favored location. In some industries, I quote in the same paragraph, location decisions are heavily influenced by tax incentives. But I can absolutely say that our complex tax law and relatively high rates of taxation motivate people to move operations offshore. So the government needs to rethink about how we get to at least a level playing field. And this is Mr. Shai. He's the gentleman that is now I'm quoting. I'd like to state that Mr. Obama appointed a bipartisan commission, and he had discussions about how to resolve this issue. But he has essentially ignored some of those recommendations, and I would think that Mr. Romney would be a lot more favorable. Next slide, please. Okay, now Jeffrey Immelt, he's the president of General Electric, and in Barron's magazine, the financial section, they wrote an article about GE's man on the job. And he was a member of Obama's Council on Jobs and Competitiveness in 2011. And obviously, he said this after he left, because it would be at odds with the commission, the council that Obama formed. But, and I quote Mr. Immelt, but a substantial obstacle for smaller companies, he says, is unnecessary regulation. At GE, we got a ton of lawyers, and we can power through anything. But if you talk to any small business, the amount of regulation has grown exponentially, not just under President Obama, but under Clinton and under Bush. And this is from Jeffrey Immelt. Well, it is a problem. Mr. Immelt felt he couldn't continue on the council, but it is serious to know that he was on the council, yet he did not really believe in the things some of the things he was doing. So it's unfortunate that happened, but that's when you don't do a good background check. You remember background checks of our numerous politicians who never made it into Obama administration. Tom Daschle, tax problems. Sebelius, tax problems. Tim Geithner, tax problems. He's only Secretary of Treasury. Why would he worry about paying taxes, you know? Unless when they checked him out, that's when they found out. There was about another half a dozen other administration people who were also found to be delinquent in their taxes. Now, these are our leaders. Great sense of leaders, and we know why this is happening. Okay, the next slide, please. Again, this is Jeffrey Immelt speaking. And I quote, the 2010 Simpson Bowles plan, he argues, was a very good blueprint for cutting federal spending and raising revenues. Alan Simpson and Erskine Bowles came up with a great plan and a great report, he says. We don't like all of it, but Immelt would much prefer that. Now Barron quotes Immelt. We would take Simpson Bowles and just do it. And this is Mr. Immelt, president of GE. In any case, he is now supporting this. Obama commissioned this group. They got the report to him. And what did he do? He didn't say much about it. In fact, he never said anything else about it after that as to why he didn't even take their recommendations. This was a bipartisan group. Of course, there was one more member of the Democratic Party because they're in power. So this indicates a leader who's not leading. Anyway, let's look at our conclusion here. You've heard the evidence from these top experts. The 7 issues from the 3 Harvard experts, Harvard Business School experts, and we also had Mr. Immelt, who was the president of GE. Very accomplished individual. Romney agrees with those statements of these gentlemen. Obama mostly does not, because he would have implemented them and he didn't. Maybe he agrees with them, but he didn't execute. He never came to the people and say, look, if these guys here are not doing this and this and that. Never about that I remember. But if you want to come in, tell me. That's the way it goes. Obama has had the right idea, but he doesn't lead, as I've said. He's acted on, I'll give you an example, the corporate tax rate, which is the highest probably in the Western world, or at least in the world except for small countries. 35% corporate tax rate. He could, and he did suggest, along with the Republicans, to come down to maybe 25 or 28. That simple thing. So simple. Somewhere in the middle of those two groups, they could have agreed. No agreement. Unlike President Clinton, who agreed, who had the same problem when he had 1994, the entire House and Senate turned over to Republican because he went so far left in 1992. So he's not leading. So what are we going to do? Well, how do you evaluate an economic disaster such as this? It's tough. There's no question about it. Listening to many experts, complex problem, nothing like it in more than 80 plus years, no blueprint, surrounded with many experts, even conflicting ideas. It's a tough problem for anybody. But we need a new team to take it to the next level, because Obama stated that he created only 4.5 million jobs, and we need 23 million more. We thank Obama to remember, he spent close to $800 billion. Then he added on another 1.3, $5.2 trillion because he didn't want to balance the budget. And he did that. Well, Romney, as an alternative, has real experience. By the way, this Choose Life license plate has been approved in Massachusetts. We had a minimum number of 3,000. You can continue subscribing because occasionally people leave the state. Anyway, Romney has real business experience that adds great credibility that Obama cannot. If anyone had 2 sheets of paper with no names, one of Obama's experience, one of Romney's experience, the great majority of people, without knowing who they are, majority of people would never, almost never select Obama. There's very little doubt this will happen. That is, Romney will obviously have the majority. He can assess experts, that is, Romney, because he has experience finely tuned over decades of actual case histories. Obama tried to do something that was extremely difficult for someone who has essentially no relevant business experience. Why didn't he consult with the best from his own Harvard University business school? No mention of any of this. For example, business outsourcing. Instead, he keeps repeating a statement, as I said, about outsourcing, trying to connect with the workers, and it's unfortunate they tend to believe him. It resonates with the workers, but he's deluding them. This is the sadness to do anything to win. It's called Chicago politics. We know how it's been working. This is a new realm of disconcerting education of the public and taking advantage of the lack of ability to understand what's happening, and these half-truths, truths that are not true, fed to the people. It's really very sad. I can remember the scandal of JFK when he won the election. Again, Chicago politics. And it was a very close election against Nixon. And of course, Chicago came under the microscope. There was lots of reports of all kinds of ballot stuffing. Nixon was a gentleman because he didn't call for a recount. And if I were him, I would have. But he let it go the way it was, a very close election. But this is what it is. We have a gentleman who's lived and grown up in this kind of environment. You have Blagojevich, another criminal, and there are others. Richard Daley was the one who was running Chicago, and he did what he could to get JFK elected. And it's sad that we have President Obama who has some of the characteristics. I have no proof beyond what I've just said. In some ways, you think that he's working against us in order just to make sure that his popularity is greater than the Republicans. And this happened at one time when, let's say, when Clinton had the Republicans. At that time, there was an issue, and the Republicans actually shut down the government. And they thought they had the winning hand. But Clinton survived, and his numbers rose. In the same situation here, Obama has more favorable rating, about 40% plus, than the Republicans. Granted, the Republicans have not shut down the government, but Obama's taken advantage of them. He's toasting the Republicans, literally toasting them. And people believe Obama, and they're giving the Republicans who are trying to help like about a 10% rating. That's about it. So the Republicans have fallen into a trap. Obama's more concerned about making sure he wins and demonizes the Republicans than to do something. And Clinton was far different from that. He passed major welfare reform. He had 8 years of tremendous economic results, jobs, etc. One of the most successful time periods in modern history as far as jobs go. He worked in a number of different areas, bipartisanship. Unfortunately, Obama doesn't like the schmooze. It's either his way or no way, and he's going to try to put you in a call and make you the bad guy. And we all lose. The next program will be about Michelle talking about her husband, saying that you can trust Obama. Well, the next program will be, will you or can we trust Obama? See my website for the program. It will be on the website, johnnystraighttalk.com. Go to the computer and you can select this, Chick-fil-A and others. Glad to speak to you all tonight. And can America compete? Well, It's going to be very difficult under Obama and much easier under Romney. In fact, this could be the far worse recession, even worse than the Depression. We're not over it yet. And the pain is going to come as soon as inflation comes. Thank you again.